Hi everyone! Cupcake Rainbow and I decided to come outside and enjoy the nice sunshine and the beautiful spring weather. I thought we could sing together a new name song. Will you help me? The song goes like this. Ryan's name begins with R, begins with R, begins with R. Ryan's name begins with R. R, 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 R. Ryan. Nice job. Let's see if you know which name is next. Andres' name begins with A, begins with A, begins with A. Andres' name begins with A. Andres. Let's see what's next. Let's put Cupcake Rainbow to watch. Harry's name begins with H, begins with H, begins with H. Harry's name begins with H. Harry. Nice. Let's see what's next. Dania's name begins with D, begins with D, begins with D. Dania's name begins with D. D. Dania. Whose name is next? Oh, this is a hard one. S and H makes the sound sh. Sheep's name begins with S, begins with S, begins with S. Sheep's name begins with S. SH makes the sound sh, sh, sh. Very nice, friends. Do you know what name this is? Giselle's name begins with G, begins with G, begins with G. Giselle's name begins with G, Giselle. Great job. Let's see what name is next. Calder's name begins with C, begins with C, begins with C. Calder's name begins with C. Calder. Nice. Let's see whose name is next. Anna's name begins with A, begins with A, begins with A. Anna's name begins with A. Anna. This is the same like my name, Miss Anna, right? Whose name is this one? Natalie's name begins with N, begins with N, begins with N. Natalie's name begins with N. Natalie. Awesome. Whose name is next? We have another name that begins with SH sound. Remember what SH makes? The sound sh is for Shanti. Shanti's name begins with S, begins with S, begins with S. Shanti's name begins with S. SH makes the sound sh, sh, sh. Do you hear the bird? The bird likes my singing, and the bird is singing with me. Muse's name begins with M, begins with M, begins with M. Muse's name begins with M. Muse. Great, friends. Another name that begins with C. Do you know whose name this is? Yes, Callan's name begins with C, begins with C, begins with C. Callan's name begins with C. Callan. Let's see who's next. Another name that begins with S. Sammy's name begins with S, begins with S, begins with S. Sammy's name begins with S. S, 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 Sammy. Whose name begins with A? Aaron's name begins with A, begins with A, begins with A. Aaron's name begins with A. Aaron. Let's see who's next. I think this is the last one. Catherine's name begins with K, begins with K, begins with K. Catherine's name begins with K. Catherine. That's it. No more names. You did a super job. Give yourselves big claps. Now, if you want, you can do this song with your family members. You can sing, for example, Mommy's name. Mommy's name begins with M, begins with M, begins with M. Mommy's name begins with M. Mommy. Or you can do Daddy. Daddy's name begins with D, begins with D, begins with D. Daddy's name begins with D, Daddy. Just have fun with it. Bye, friends.